was born on August 1, 1930, in Dongan, a small village in southwestern France. His father was a postman, which significantly influenced his later views on social class and equality. Despite his humble background, Bourdieu excelled academically and went on to study at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure or ENS in Paris, where he focused on philosophy. ENS placed him in contact with many of France's future intellectual elite. After completing his studies, Bourdieu served in the French army during the Algerian War from 1955 to 1959. While in Algeria, he conducted field work that later formed the basis of his major, sociological work. Upon returning to France, Bourdieu held academic positions at several institutions, becoming a director at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales and later chair of sociology at the Collège de France, one of the country's most prestigious academic institutions. Bourdieu's work spans a variety of topics, but some of his most influential concepts and books include Outline of a Theory of Practice, The Logic of Practice, The State, Nobility, and Distinction, a social critique of the judgment of taste. From 1990s to 2000s, Bourdieu became increasingly involved in public intellectual life, often criticizing neoliberal policies and defending the rights of workers, immigrants, and students. Bourdieu passed away on January 23, 2002, but his influence continues in social sciences globally.
Bourdieu argues in his theory of practice that inherent in all human beings is practical reason, an instinctive understanding of what to do in social situations. For example, we know that cutting in line will likely earn disapproving stares, even if no one says anything out loud. However, while instinctive, this practical reason is not innate and differs from person to person because of the interplay of several factors. The first of these factors is habitus, the Latin word from which the English habit comes. But while a habit may be an individual tendency, like say reading a book, habitus instead refers to the active but unconscious way these tendencies are instilled by the people and institutions around us. The invisible hand inside each one of us, influencing how we think, act, and perceive what we can do. Closely linked to this habitus is the broader idea of capital, a concept often perceived of in economic terms. Think books like Marx's Das Kapital or systems like capitalism. In his work, though, Bourdieu expands this idea, arguing that capital goes beyond material wealth and can be converted into other intangible forms that can help a person succeed in certain situations. Cultural capital, for instance, can be embodied in things like the language you prefer to speak or the music you prefer to sing, objectified in items like the art or books you own, or institutionalized through official recognition like medals or diplomas. Then, there's social capital, the value of your relationships and networks, like the friends you have or the groups you belong to. All this ties into what Bourdieu described as symbolic capital, which is power earned from capital itself and your ownership of it. Thus, capital in this sense is no longer just what you have, but also how others perceive you as having this capital. These elements, habitus and different forms of capital, all come together in what Bourdieu calls the field. A field isn't a little open space like a football field or a classroom. Instead, it's any social setting with its own rules, expectations, and power dynamics. It's in this field that one's habitus and capital merge to form one's practical reason concretely exemplified in the decisions we make. The intermingling of the factors Bourdieu identified is best seen in an ordinary situation, like for instance, a student cheating on a test. In this case, the student's practical reason may guide his sense of what is appropriate or advantageous to do in a given situation, like recognizing that cheating may increase his chances of success despite the risk. This reason, in turn, is shaped by his habitus. Why does he think that success must be achieved no matter how unethical the means? Could he have been molded this way by strict parents, peer pressure, or socially acceptable standards of intelligence? These ways of thinking also reflect his capital, or lack thereof. Does he have access to cultural capital, like books to study, social capital, like friends who would encourage him to study, or symbolic capital, like the reputation of being an academic achiever. All this plays out in how he performs in the field of school, with its own rules and stakes. It can be argued then that his lack for the feel of the rules causes him to cheat, because he is made to see the field of school as a competitive landscape where it's survival of the fittest. Bourdieu's theory of habitus is one of the most foundational theories in modern sociology, but just like any other theory, it is still just a set of ideas, still limited by its own strengths and limitations.
First, habitus is holistic. It's not just who you are, it's where you're from. Your habits, tastes, and even how you speak are shaped by social structures, your upbringing, education, or class. Yet Bourdieu insists we are neither puppets nor fully free. Society lives in us, and through us, it evolves. Next, habitus is universal. Beyond sociology, its application illuminates with other fields such as education. In sports, muscle memory reflects a sporting habitus. Habitus bridges philosophy's embodied knowledge, political attitudes, and even media interpretation. It helps us understand how and why people have different interpretations of media and art. Habitus doesn't rigidly determine behavior. It gives us a range of possibilities shaped by past experiences. Finally, habitus has foundations. Bourdieu's genius lies in his foundations. He reimagines Marx's focus on economics. For Marx, factories breed class division. For Bourdieu, it's also the subtle hierarchies of accent, fashion, or taste that cement your social position. From Gramsci, Bourdieu takes cultural hegemony, the idea that power isn't just enforced, but felt. Why do we accept inequality? Habitus shows how schools teach us to see certain careers as aspirational and others as lesser. Gramsci called this ideological control. Bourdieu dubs it symbolic violence, the quiet trauma of internalizing oppression. But habitus isn't fate. Habitus is a mirror that reveals society shapes us and how we, in turn, reshape it. And by understanding it, we gain the power to challenge the invisible scripts we live by.
One of the critics on Bourdieu's habitus is that it seems deterministic. Some interpretations and critics suggest that habitus implies that people are bounded by their social roles. One of the interpretations says that Bourdieu's notion of habitus may fall into what we call as determinist trap, wherein individuals are seen as mere puppets of structure that is shaped by society with no little control. However, this also depends on how we define determinism. If we take determinism to mean any attempt to explain social action to explanatory schemes, then yes, indeed, habitus is deterministic. However, if we define determinism as the idea that a theory can strictly predict how people behave in every situation, like in psychology or economics, then habitus isn't deterministic. This ties into another concern, the lack of agency in habitus. Critics argue that because habitus emphasizes the internalization of social structures, it downplays individual consciousness and will. Again, we circle back to this idea of people as puppets, not of society this time, but of habitus itself. If everything we think and do is shaped by a social background, where's the space for choice? Finally, there's the issue of social change. Some critics point out that habitus may not be flexible enough to account for rapid or unexpected shifts in society. Bourdieu himself acknowledged that habitus can misfire. That is, when people are placed in unfamiliar contexts, their usual ways of thinking and acting may no longer make sense. These misfires can lead to moments of confusion or what some call critical moments of perplexity. In these cases, habitus alone may not be enough to explain what's happening or how people adapt. In the Philippine educational context, habitus reveals itself in the persistent and systemic inequalities that shape students' academic journeys. Each year, the University of the Philippines holds the well-anticipated UPCAP. Year by year, students from various schools and socioeconomic backgrounds take the test. However, from a closer look, passage of the UPCAT remain to be dominated by students from private schools. Habitus must explain the unequal distribution of academic resources and preparation factors. The private school students often have better access to these resources, such as the review centers, well-equipped classrooms and facilities, better learning environment, and better family support system. In contrast, public school students often face overcrowded classrooms, limited access to resources, and limited preparations, which also indirectly affects their test performance. Another instance is the recent removal of the MTBMLE as the official medium of instruction in early grades. This highlights how our educational sector continues to ignore the habitus of learners from diverse linguistic communities. This makes our learners be taught in a language foreign to their lived experiences, further disrupting comprehension and alienates them from their learning. Their habitus, which is shaped by their mother tongue and cultural experiences, is pushed aside in favor of the dominant language ideologies. This change only further benefits students who are already fluent in Filipino or English, deepening existing inequalities. With these, habitus isn't merely a theory or a framework that we read about in academic papers. It is also lived and embedded in our everyday lives as humans or as learners. Recognizing habitus influence is crucial if we want to create a better educational system that is truly inclusive for our learners.